Welcome back to the channel, everyone. Tonight, I'm bringing you a story that sounds more like the plot of a crime thriller than something that actually happened. A missing baby, an armed suspect, reckless drivers, emotional confrontations, a violent domestic dispute, and a massive manhunt in the darkness, all unfolding within the same unforgettable night. As always, if you enjoy true crime stories based on real events, make sure to subscribe and stay with me until the very end, because every decision made during this night carried serious consequences, and what started with a single emergency call quickly turned into a chain of events that no officer on duty could have predicted. It was late in the evening when dispatch received a report that immediately sent shockwaves through law enforcement. A vehicle connected to a hospital incident had been taken, and inside that vehicle was a baby. Within seconds, police radios came alive as officers rushed from different directions, trying to gather information before valuable time slipped away. Witnesses had reportedly seen a white BMW leaving the area with a child in the back seat, and because the circumstances were unclear, officers had to assume the worst. A missing child situation leaves no room for hesitation. Every minute matters. Every mile traveled increases the danger. As patrol units flooded nearby roads and highways, officers coordinated through radio traffic, attempting to pinpoint the vehicle's location. Then suddenly, a breakthrough came in. The white BMW had been spotted traveling on Interstate 85. The vehicle was moving quickly, and officers immediately began positioning themselves ahead of its route. Traffic units coordinated with one another while other officers moved into place, determined to stop the vehicle before anything happened to the child. The tension inside every patrol car was enormous because nobody knew who was behind the wheel or what their intentions were. As the pursuit of information unfolded, officers finally located the vehicle and moved in. Within moments, they successfully stopped it. What happened next brought an enormous sense of relief. The baby was found alive and unharmed. The suspect responsible was taken into custody without incident, and officers carefully removed the child from the vehicle. After the chaos and uncertainty, the child was reunited with the mother, who had been waiting anxiously at the hospital. For everyone involved, it was the outcome they had desperately hoped for. But while one crisis was ending, another was already beginning somewhere else in the city. Not long afterward, an officer conducting a routine traffic stop encountered a situation that could have ended in tragedy. A woman had been stopped because of vehicle-related violations, and as the officer stood outside his patrol car handling the stop, a Dodge Charger suddenly swerved aggressively toward the area where he and the driver were standing. In a matter of seconds, the vehicle narrowly missed striking both the officer and the woman. Had the driver been only a few inches closer, 2 lives could have been lost instantly. The officer immediately recognized the seriousness of what had happened and requested assistance. Witnesses confirmed that the vehicle appeared to have intentionally drifted toward them before speeding away. What had started as an ordinary traffic stop suddenly became a criminal investigation. Officers began searching for the Dodge Charger while reviewing information about the registered owner and possible driver. Eventually, investigators tracked down the suspect. As officers spoke with him and his family, it became clear that the vehicle had been driven by someone who was not legally licensed to operate it. The realization frustrated officers even further, because the consequences of that reckless decision could have been devastating. The driver's actions had nearly killed 2 innocent people. Yet some family members seemed unable to fully grasp how serious the situation had been. Officers explained that one reckless moment could have changed countless lives forever. Criminal citations were issued, court appearances became mandatory, and the driver now faced consequences that could affect his future for years. But even as that investigation moved forward, another emergency call echoed across police radios. This time, officers were searching for an intoxicated man who had reportedly been firing a gun into the air at a public location before fleeing from law enforcement. Armed suspects are among the most dangerous calls officers can receive because nobody knows how they will react when confronted. Patrol units quickly located the vehicle, connected to the report, and attempted to stop it. Eventually, the driver pulled over, but instead of following commands, he remained inside the truck. Officers surrounded the area and repeatedly instructed him to show his hands. The tension was visible in every movement. One wrong decision could have triggered a deadly confrontation. For several minutes, officers carefully negotiated with the suspect, trying to convince him to cooperate peacefully. Finally, after repeated commands and intense communication, the man surrendered. He exited the vehicle and was taken into custody without anyone being injured. Investigators soon learned that he was heavily intoxicated. The firearm was recovered, and evidence was collected linking him to the reported gunfire. Officers later confirmed that he would face multiple charges, including driving under the influence, reckless endangerment, possession of a firearm while intoxicated, and fleeing from police. Once again, a potentially deadly situation had been resolved without lives being lost. Yet the night was far from over. Across town, another officer found himself dealing with someone he knew all too well. A woman riding a bicycle had once again attracted police attention because of repeated traffic-related violations. What should have been a simple interaction quickly turned into a heated exchange. The woman argued with officers, challenged nearly every instruction given to her, and openly displayed hostility throughout the encounter. Officers attempted to remain professional despite the escalating attitude, but the situation highlighted a common problem faced by law enforcement every day. Many people focus only on receiving a citation while ignoring the behavior that led to the stop in the first place. Eventually, the encounter ended with warnings, citations, and a great deal of frustration on both sides. Compared to the earlier incidents, it might have seemed minor, but it served as another reminder that police officers never know what kind of situation awaits them during even the simplest stop. As midnight approached, dispatchers continued receiving calls, and officers remained busy moving from one unpredictable situation to another. None of them knew that before the night was over, they would encounter even more dangerous events involving alcohol, violence, weapons, and desperate individuals trying to escape accountability. For now, the missing child had been rescued, a reckless driver had been identified, an armed intoxicated suspect had been arrested, and multiple investigations were still unfolding. But the most dramatic events of the night were still ahead. In the next part of this story, officers would confront a mother accused of driving after drinking with children in the vehicle, respond to a violent domestic dispute involving knives, and become involved in incidents that would push tensions even higher as the night spiraled deeper into chaos. As the night continued, officers barely had time to catch their breath before another troubling call demanded their attention. By now, several dangerous situations had already unfolded across the city, but what happened next struck a personal nerve with one veteran officer. It began with what appeared to be a simple traffic stop. A vehicle sitting unusually far into an intersection caught an officer's attention. At first glance, it looked like a driver who had simply stopped in the wrong place, but experience had taught officers that small details often reveal bigger problems. As the patrol car pulled in behind the vehicle and emergency lights illuminated the road, the officer approached and immediately noticed several warning signs. The driver appeared nervous. Her reactions seemed delayed. Her eyes looked glassy. And as the conversation continued, the officer's suspicion grew stronger. When he asked routine questions, the woman explained that she had just come from a movie theater and was heading home. But something didn't feel right. Then the officer spotted what appeared to be an alcoholic beverage inside the vehicle. What made the situation even worse was the fact that children were sitting in the back seat. The moment he realized kids were involved, the tone of the encounter changed completely. The officer became visibly upset. To him, this was no longer just another traffic stop. It was a situation that reminded him of painful memories from his own childhood. As he questioned the driver, he discovered that she had recently purchased a high alcohol content drink and had already consumed part of it. The officer couldn't hide his frustration. He repeatedly pointed toward the children and explained how dangerous the situation was. In his mind, all it would take was one mistake, one distracted moment, one accident, and innocent children could lose their lives. The woman insisted she had only recently opened the drink and argued that she was not impaired. Still, officers proceeded with a series of field sobriety tests to determine whether she was safe to continue driving. The investigation revealed that while there wasn't enough evidence to support a full driving under the influence charge, there were other serious violations. Her license status created additional problems, and officers determined she could not legally continue operating the vehicle. As the arrest process began, emotions ran high. The officer explained that his anger was not personal. He told her that as a child he had experienced similar situations involving poor decisions by adults, and seeing children exposed to unnecessary danger deeply affected him. The woman eventually acknowledged her mistakes, but by then the consequences were unavoidable. She was taken into custody while arrangements were made for the children. It was a difficult situation for everyone involved. The officer later admitted that cases involving children often stay with him longer than most arrests, because innocent kids are the ones forced to live with the consequences of adult decisions. Unfortunately, before officers could fully process that incident, another emergency call sent them racing across town. This one involved a domestic dispute where a weapon had reportedly been seen. Domestic violence calls are among the most unpredictable situations law enforcement officers face. Emotions are already running high before police arrive, and the presence of a weapon dramatically increases the risk. As officers approached the residence, they immediately encountered chaos. Family members were shouting. Conflicting stories filled the air. Tension could be felt from the moment they stepped onto the property. According to witnesses, an argument had escalated between relatives living under the same roof. What began as a disagreement over noise and respect had rapidly spiraled out of control. One man claimed he had simply asked family members to lower their voices while a child was trying to sleep. Instead of calming down, the argument intensified. Accusations flew back and forth. Tempers exploded. Eventually, a knife was introduced into the confrontation. By the time officers arrived, one individual was still holding a blade and refusing to fully comply with commands. Officers repeatedly ordered him to drop the weapon. Every second that passed increased the danger. The suspect appeared more focused on explaining himself than following instructions. Officers didn't care about explanations at that moment. Their priority was simple: get the knife on the ground before someone got hurt. The suspect continued talking. Officers continued giving commands. Then, when it became clear the situation might escalate further, a taser was deployed. The electrical charge immediately ended the confrontation, and the suspect fell to the ground where officers safely took him into custody. Fortunately, nobody suffered serious injuries. Investigators later learned that the argument had involved multiple family members, including a father and son, whose relationship had already been strained long before that evening. What shocked officers most was how quickly a relatively minor disagreement had transformed into a dangerous confrontation involving weapons. Once again, they were reminded how rapidly emotions can turn ordinary conflicts into criminal incidents. As that scene finally settled down, another call came in. This one seemed strange from the beginning. Officers responded to a reported domestic disturbance involving a man and his sister. Upon arrival, they found a visibly intoxicated individual whose behavior confused almost everyone present. He appeared frightened, emotional, and extremely difficult to understand. At times, he spoke about family arguments. At other moments, he seemed convinced that people were trying to harm him in unusual ways. Officers patiently attempted to determine whether a crime had actually occurred or whether they were simply dealing with someone heavily under the influence. As the conversation continued, the man became increasingly emotional. He repeatedly apologized. He worried about being arrested. At one point, he even asked officers whether he was going to die. Despite his unusual behavior, officers remained calm and reassuring. Eventually, a records check revealed something important. The man had an active warrant connected to a previous public intoxication case. With that discovery, officers now had legal grounds to take him into custody. Rather than escalating the situation, they carefully explained what was happening and guided him through the arrest process. Compared to some of the night's earlier incidents, this arrest was relatively peaceful. Yet, it still demonstrated another reality officers face every day. Many calls are not simply about criminal behavior, but also involve addiction, mental health struggles, and individuals who need help beyond what law enforcement alone can provide. By this point in the night, officers had dealt with a missing child, reckless drivers, armed suspects, alcohol-related offenses, family violence, and multiple arrests. Most people would assume the chaos was finally winding down. They would be wrong. In fact, the biggest operation of the entire night was still waiting to unfold. Just as officers began clearing their scenes and completing paperwork, urgent radio traffic suddenly erupted once again. A neighboring jurisdiction was involved in a high-speed pursuit. A pickup truck had fled from law enforcement after refusing to stop. Speeds were already exceeding 100 miles per hour. The vehicle was heading toward another county, and officers immediately began coordinating resources. Patrol units repositioned. K-9 teams prepared for deployment. Additional agencies joined the operation. What nobody realized yet was that the pursuit would soon lead officers deep into the darkness, trigger a massive search involving dogs, drones, and multiple departments, and uncover far more suspects than anyone expected. The truck was still running. The chase was still active, and before sunrise, one of the largest manhunts of the night would be underway. By the time officers received word of the fleeing pickup truck, it felt as though the entire night had been one non-stop emergency. Yet what was about to happen would become the most complicated and exhausting operation of all. The pursuit had already crossed county lines by the time many officers joined the response. The truck was reportedly traveling at speeds well over 100 miles per hour, weaving through traffic and refusing every opportunity to stop. Dispatch centers from multiple jurisdictions began coordinating information as patrol units positioned themselves ahead of the fleeing vehicle. Officers knew that a pursuit at those speeds could end in disaster at any moment. One mistake by the driver could kill innocent motorists, passengers, or even the officers involved. Despite the danger, the truck continued racing down the highway. Eventually, law enforcement deployed stop sticks in an effort to disable the vehicle. The plan worked. The truck struck the spikes, damaging its tires. But instead of surrendering, the driver continued pushing forward. Even with damaged tires, the vehicle traveled several more miles before finally losing enough mobility to stop. When officers arrived at the scene, they expected to take the occupants into custody. Instead, they found something far more challenging. Multiple people had already bailed out of the truck and disappeared into the darkness. What had started as a vehicle pursuit instantly transformed into a large-scale manhunt. One young female remained near the vehicle and was quickly secured, but officers learned that several others had fled into nearby woods. At first, nobody knew exactly how many people had escaped. Witnesses gave conflicting numbers. Some said 4. Others believed 5 or 6. The uncertainty created a serious problem because officers had no idea who they were searching for or how many suspects were hiding in the area. K-9 units were immediately requested. Additional deputies arrived. Perimeters were established. Roads were blocked. Officers equipped themselves for a long search as darkness covered the surrounding terrain. The area was difficult to navigate. Thick vegetation, hills, and uneven ground made movement slow and exhausting. Still, officers pushed forward because they knew the suspects could not be allowed to disappear. A police dog soon picked up a scent and began tracking through the woods. The K-9 handler focused entirely on the dog while other officers provided security. Together, They moved deeper into the darkness. Every snapped branch and every sound in the distance raised tension. Nobody knew whether the people hiding in the woods were armed or desperate enough to fight. The search continued for what felt like hours. Then, suddenly, officers spotted movement ahead. Flashlights illuminated figures hiding among the trees. Commands echoed through the woods. "Sheriff's office! Show us your hands! Come out now!" One by one, suspects began emerging from their hiding places. Some appeared frightened. Others looked exhausted. Most seemed to realize that escape was no longer possible. Several were taken into custody without resistance. As officers secured those individuals, they tried to determine whether they had located everyone. Unfortunately, the answer was no. More suspects were still missing. The search resumed. Once again, the K-9 team pushed forward through rough terrain, while officers coordinated positions using radio traffic. Information flowed constantly between agencies. Some suspects claimed they knew where others had run. Others provided confusing or contradictory statements. Officers followed every lead while maintaining the perimeter. Then another breakthrough occurred. Additional individuals were located hiding deeper in the woods. Commands were issued, hands were shown, arrests were made. The number of people connected to the truck continued growing. What officers originally believed might involve a handful of suspects was becoming something much larger. As more detainees were gathered, investigators worked to identify each person's role. Who had been driving? Who had fled? Who had simply been a passenger? Those questions would take time to answer. For now, the priority remained finding anyone still unaccounted for. Technology soon provided additional assistance. A drone equipped with infrared capabilities was deployed above the search area. From the sky, operators scanned the landscape for heat signatures. While officers searched from the ground, the drone watched from above, dramatically increasing the chances of locating anyone still hiding. The combination of K-9 tracking and aerial surveillance created enormous pressure on the remaining fugitives. Every movement risked revealing their location. Every minute reduced their chances of escape. At one point, officers observed what appeared to be movement near a wooded area not far from the highway. Search teams adjusted their positions and moved toward the location. The operation had become a coordinated effort involving multiple agencies, deputies, patrol officers, K-9 handlers, and drone operators, all working toward the same goal. Eventually, another suspect was located. Then, another. The total number of individuals connected to the truck continued increasing until officers realized just how crowded the vehicle had been. What started as reports of several passengers ultimately revealed a much larger group than anyone had initially expected. By now, nearly everyone had been found. Yet one important person remained missing. Investigators believed the driver was still somewhere in the area. This individual was considered especially significant because he was allegedly responsible for leading officers on the dangerous pursuit that had triggered the entire operation. Search teams refused to give up. The drone remained overhead. Officers continued checking roads, fields, wooded areas, and possible escape routes. Then, in an unexpected twist, the final suspect was located in one of the simplest ways imaginable. After all the tracking, searching, and technology used throughout the night, an officer spotted a man walking along a roadway. The individual matched information connected to the outstanding suspect. He was quickly stopped, detained, and identified. Just like that, the final piece of the puzzle fell into place. The manhunt was over. Relief spread through the officers who had spent hours searching in darkness and difficult terrain. What had begun as a high-speed pursuit involving a single pickup truck had ended with multiple arrests, a massive coordinated search, and the successful capture of everyone involved. Investigators later determined that a total of 8 people had been connected to the vehicle. Some were juveniles, others were adults. Charges varied depending on each individual's actions, but the alleged driver faced the most serious accusations, including felony evading and resisting arrest. Looking back on the night, it was remarkable how many different situations officers had confronted within just a few hours. A missing child safely recovered from a stolen vehicle, a reckless driver who nearly caused a deadly collision, an intoxicated armed suspect firing a gun in public, a mother arrested after making dangerous decisions with children in her vehicle, family disputes escalating into violence, individuals struggling with intoxication and outstanding warrants, and finally, a high-speed pursuit ending in one of the largest searches of the night. Each incident was different, yet they all shared one thing in common. A single bad decision had the power to change lives forever. Some people made choices that put children at risk. Others endangered complete strangers. Some acted out of anger, while others acted out of fear, intoxication, or recklessness. In every case, officers were forced to step into unpredictable situations where the outcome was never guaranteed. Thankfully, despite the danger, the night ended without the tragedy that could have easily occurred. The missing baby was reunited with family. Innocent people were not killed by reckless drivers. Armed confrontations were resolved without deadly force, and every suspect connected to the pursuit was eventually located. For law enforcement, it was a reminder that even an ordinary shift can transform into a series of life-changing events. For everyone else, it was proof that a single moment of poor judgment can trigger consequences that last far longer than anyone expects. And as the sun finally began to rise, officers completed their reports, cleared their scenes, and prepared for another day, knowing that somewhere another radio call was already waiting.